Welcome, and thanks for joining us on the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. Each week, we sit down with CRE experts to uncover trends, insights, and strategies that are shaping the industry today. I'm Shanti Ryle, Director of Content Marketing here at Crexi, and today we are thrilled to sit down with Joe Hills and Josh Lipoff, co-founders at HLI Partners. Before we jump in, a little bit about our guests. Joe Hills and Josh Lipoff are co-founders of HLI Partners, which is a boutique commercial real estate firm based in Orlando. With deep roots in the industry and a combined track record from national firms like JLL and others, they launched HLI to focus on high-impact industrial and office brokerage across Central Florida. Joe has closed over 475 deals, totaling more than $1 billion in transaction volume, while Josh has led some of the region's largest and most complex industrial leases and build-to-suit projects, which I'm sure we'll be getting into today. They've built their business around local expertise, hands-on service, and the ability to compete with national players, especially in a market as nuanced as Orlando. Today, we're going to talk about how they made the leap from a large brokerage to building their own firm, how they've stayed competitive through market headwinds, and what they are seeing today in terms of tenant demand, land values, and deal flow in Florida's evolving CRE landscape. Both of y'all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I was very excited to have you here. And I know I just covered a bit about your backgrounds, but to kick us off, I'd love to hear more in your own words about your career path, lessons learned. So for each of you, how did you get started in commercial real estate and what made you decide this is going to be your career long-term?
I'll let Joe lead us off.
I would say for me, I was one of the fortunate ones. I had 2 or 3 uncles in the business. So when I got out of school, there wasn't a natural path for me except for real estate. We had sales in our blood. And so I got a lot of good tutelage and some mentorship in terms of what to do in the business, how to act. I didn't exactly get thrown a book of business, but I definitely got a lot of mentorship along the way and some good pointers. So that was kind of my lead into the business, was learning from family, the good things they did and the bad things they did.
Sure.
I had a professor at the University of Miami that was a broker and an attorney. And he kind of took me under his wing and kind of gave me kind of the playbook on how to get into the industry. And, my story is pretty bootstrapping. He gave me a list and it led to a couple of great conversations and a relationship that honestly took me from Coral Gables up to Philadelphia to start with Colliers.
Wow. Okay, so each of you get to these big shops. You had the right introductions or the right examples from family, in your case, Joe. And I'm curious, what were those first few years like for you that, gave you a crash course into this industry? And what led up to the moment where you ultimately decided to leave these brokerages and start your own company?
Well, I think in my case, it was about 20 years into my career, or a little bit more, when we converted over and started our own shop. So obviously the first several years in the business were pretty bootstrappy. I had, basically started off with no draw and nothing, because when I joined Cushman back in the day, they didn't have any availability for new broker, new hire. And so I just said, hey, listen, I'll come on and do whatever it takes, and kind of led from that position. So it was pretty tough environment to come in, but learned a ton, had some great mentors along the way, and obviously led to JLL and meeting Josh a little over about 13, 14 years later.
Wow. All right. How about you, Josh?
I started my commercial real estate career in 2007. So for about 12 months, everything was great until we all remember the crash in 2008. And I was in a mentorship program that was about 2 years. Luckily, they didn't release us. We just thought every day might be our last day because the market was in turmoil. But kind of just plowed through it and then kind of rode the wave up from Colliers into JLL. And then, in 2013, I started talking about potentially moving back to Florida. I had a lot of family down here, and I figured it was a good market to grow in, and Orlando kind of became an opportunity. And I didn't know much about Orlando because I only lived in South Florida, so I knew the Miami Fort Lauderdale market. Some of the supply chain guys that I knew at JLL said, this is kind of going to be the hub for Florida, and it could be a really good opportunity. I think timing was great. And this is why Joe and I's relationship is so great, because I knew industrial and he had a very deep understanding of Central Florida. So it was kind of, I'll teach you industrial, you teach me the market. And it became, a great partnership ever since. And it's worked. And this is what got us to the point of maybe opening up our own shop. And we can kind of delve into more of that in the development here shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a big part of starting any venture is you got to be surrounded with people you really trust, right? So I'm curious, before we get into the start of HLI and like what led up to that, do you have any stories of your guys' initial partnership and where, just really good examples of you had to build that trust to either get a deal to the finish line? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, go ahead, Jay.
I can say this, and I'll let Joe. Partnerships are unique, and it's rare that you find someone that literally you trust with your life. And I'll say this about Joe, and we didn't even know each other when I moved down here. I mean, he took me under his wing. He introduced me to, his family and his wife, and he spent his weekends with me, literally driving me around the market. And I can't tell you if anyone else would have really done that. And I'm forever grateful, because it's a rarity to have somebody like that. And I just think that helps strengthen, which is now, almost a 14-year partnership.
Yeah, I think the funnest part for us was, at the time JLL lacked an industrial platform. They had one guy in the shop, and he was on his way out, so to speak. And they asked us to come together and put something together for the platform, because obviously it was a really strong brand in the market nationally, but locally didn't have much to show for it in terms of industrial strength. I had a strong background in tenant. Josh knew the industry really well. And when the two of us kind of put heads and tails together in terms of the market and the industry knowledge, it was a really good cocktail. I think the industry was headed towards more of a landlord environment, and instead of a tenant-driven climate within the culture of the company nationally. And so we kind of battled internally for years with, the desire for landlord versus tenant work internally, and where they were headed as a focus group. But I think we had a lot of tremendous success in the early years of putting together some large transactions in the market that a lot of people didn't think we could put together. And so that was kind of the fun part for us, was a little bit of being the underdog, the brand that wasn't out there, the brand that nobody really paid much attention to, and trying to find a way to get market share and do deals that no one thought you could do. That was kind of the fuel for us at the time.
Yeah,
still
absolutely. And it makes sense, you've proved out your abilities through this 14-year partnership, or maybe it wasn't 14 years when you started HLI, that you proved out that the two of you do really good work together. So walk us through the moment where you decided together to leave an established firm, do your own thing. What were the biggest risks you had to weigh? Did you have deals lined up when you started? What did the early days look like for a brand new company for you?
Well, I think we were really lucky. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, we were fired from JLL, just from a simple standpoint of they didn't want to have two teams internally doing the same thing. And I was under a long-term contract at the time. It worked out really well for us because, we've built a great company together. But I think I'm glad that it happened the way that it did, because we may not have done it for several more years, or maybe not at all. But we're very fortunate in the sense of we were able to benefit from the market where it was and build off a lot of development and tenant representation opportunities. So,
yeah,
sure.
I'm forever grateful. I mean, last week we had a big groundbreaking ceremony on a new 116,000 square foot warehouse that we did with a sports card distributing company. And so,
wow.
To Joe's point, had we stayed with JLL, we wouldn't have. Yeah, we've started technically our second building now as HLI. So, and there's a couple more that are in the wings. I mean, things happen for a reason, and I'm forever grateful.
Shanti,
Yeah.
it's up to you if you want us to put that out there, if you think we should taper that down. But
I mean, everyone loves an origin story. So, you were kind of forced out of the nest, it sounds
correct.
like.
Yes.
How did you think about strategizing in those early months? You said you had one contract that gave you a little bit of wiggle room, but like, what were the first 6 months like? Like, how did you ramp up business? What did you do? What was your
We
playbook?
were, we were really fortunate. I had done this once before when I'd left Cushman with a partner, uncle at the time, and we started a boutique shop, or a unique shop, as you'd call it, here in the marketplace. So I had a little bit of experience in the market from starting from scratch and doing it that way. And obviously, fast forward the clock about 12 years later, a different partner and Josh and I kind of did it again together. So we already had office space set up. We had a lot of the ingredients sort of formulated in terms of how we wanted to do things, the strategy we thought might work, and the tenants that we wanted to pursue, the landlords. We had a decent book of business with clients here locally that were portable with us that we were able to take, and a lot of those business leaders stood behind us, which we're very thankful for to this day. But we had a lot of tremendous luck and hard work that went into formulating a strategy based upon what was working. And we tried a lot of different things to get to the right recipe, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, you had the test kitchen to experiment with before you struck out on your own, and just had a lot of happy clients that wanted to continue working with you, which is testament to your guys' hustle and effectiveness and knowledge. So I'm curious, we have a lot of broker listeners. I think many would like to someday start their own business. It's hard to do. You succeed. So if you could go back into those first few years, outside of having the reputation already, outside of having successful deals and clients that want to work with you, what strategies from your playbook do you think gave you an edge? And what do you think is most repurposable for those who would like to go out on their own?
Well, I would say this, and then I'll let Joe go. In any market across the country, for your listeners, brokers, if there's one thing that brokers have, it's information. They know what the tenants are doing. They know what the owners are doing. They know what the deal metrics are live, right, and in real time. For the few that want to go out on their own, if you take that knowledge and apply it, you can do that whatever your business card says, whether it's JLL, CBRE, or HLI, whatever. There, you can, if you have the experience, you can do transactions. Is Coca-Cola gonna roll with a boutique? Probably not. But as Joe and I know, there are thousands of companies, especially a lot of entrepreneurs, that like talking to another principal because you're talking their language. Like, we had to go lease our own space, so we understand what that takes. And now when we're talking to a company owner, we've negotiated those TIs, we've negotiated those deal points. And I think that is one big advantage that's underrated, that you can have a conversation with that. And I'll let kind of Joe go into it, because there's a whole slew of where we could take this conversation, but that's kind of my 2 cents initially.
No, I agree. I think that we were surprised in a good way with all the business leaders that we speak to and how different they treated us, because they knew that we understood even in a small microcosm of what they go through in terms of payroll and office, all the different decisions that go into running a small company, and the odds, frankly, against a small company. I don't know what they are today, but maybe it's 90-10, fail in the first 2 years or whatever, but it's a pretty good majority fail. And so I think there was a respect level of, hey, if these guys can start their own thing and take on the market and succeed, that they have our respect in a lot of cases. So that was nice to have. But I think our real advantage came from the tenant mindset. It was an extremely competitive market in Orlando. It's a lot of one-off business. There's not a lot of transaction business here, meaning there's not a ton of corporate headquarters-based clients here that have 50 transactions around the country. So the same group of brokers, and I came up in the office world, and we all competed with the same group of guys on every single one-off transaction for a better part of 15 or 20 years. And so it gives you a lot of competitive edge and learning how to adapt in any environment. And, I've played on the office side, the landlord side for industrial, the tenant side. We've done development. So with each different element that you have to learn completely new element of the business and overcome it, it gives you that sense of confidence. And confidence, in my opinion, is the difference for most people why they decide to fail, right? If you give up and you don't believe, then you wind up failing.
And I think another recipe for success, Shanti, is that Joe and I niched down a little bit. We kind of knew what we were capable of and what we were in the kind of asset classes and the size ranges that we really wanted to focus. And one of the advantages of a boutique that we didn't really have at the bigger shops was our choice in geography of where we wanted to do deals. At JLO, it was very Orlando centric. Because we had teams in Jacksonville, we had teams in Orlando, or in Tampa, we had teams in South Florida. And if we wanted to, even if we had a great relationship with those folks, we always had to bring in those local teams. And now we can go into those markets and do the kind of transactions that we want. Not to mention, if we want to buy a piece of land up there or develop up there, we can do that because we kind of we do development as well. And that also leads to other opportunities because then tenants call us for space needs. And then it just kind of, furthers the ball down where we can do more deals. And we've had some good success, and we went from 2 to 9 people in 2 years. I think that says something for Joe and I and our brand and how we treat our clients and how we treat our employees. And it's working.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do want to kind of underline a couple of things you said there. One is, the advantage of having the tenant's mindset. So crucial. I mean, everyone in any industry really wants to work with people they trust. I mean, we talked about it with your partnership in the first place. And if you can speak to the unique needs and fears and concerns of a particular tenant, landlord, whatever, and understand exactly what they're going through, if you have that added edge, like you said, of I've been through this, so I get it, that's just going to build that trust and that relationship, which is so crucial. That's why they come to you with their deals. And the other thing, like you said, the niching down. There's a lot of people who think they can do a lot of things, and power to them. But the advantage of I am the person you call when you want to do an Orlando industrial deal, period. That's such huge brand power, and it doesn't spread you guys thin. What you're good at, and you can really focus on it and get better and better and better at those particular kinds of deals and that market. Like you said, you have that deep market knowledge of Orlando, and now you're building it out as you build your company to other regions in Florida. But really just underlining those two things. I think it's maybe common knowledge that people should focus on those things, but it doesn't always get applied in practice. So I appreciate you guys getting into that.
I think we hit a 50-year low in tenant activity in the market the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the transactions above 100,000 square foot, you're going to count them on one hand. And when Josh and I were at JLL, we were doing 300 to 500,000 foot transactions, over and over and over again. And those transactions in e-commerce all shifted and changed. And so it's a lot easier to downshift than it is to shift up and try to do, if you've been doing 20,000 foot deals, to try and step in with an entrepreneur and say you can do a 200,000 to 300,000 foot deal. Yeah. And we just found a way to make those deals better for our clients and more profitable for us.
Yeah. And we'll be getting into that when we dive further into Orlando's market in general. But, kind of getting more into your competitive edge, the deal making playbook you guys have. You've been able to really grow through all the phases of, a property's pipeline, from development on the, landlord side, on the tenant side. Like you've seen a lot. So I'm curious, with this front row seat you've had on some of the biggest office industrial deals in Orlando's market, I'm curious, how are you thinking about approaching prospecting How are you thinking about, and building your information toolkit? You mentioned information is super important. How are you thinking about those things? What tools are you using to prospect, to get your data? Like how does your strategy look today?
This off?
Yeah, you go, Jay.
Well, to Joe's point, when the market was, and this is probably good for entrepreneurs, sometimes you got to double down when at the worst of times, so to speak. And we talked as partners, and we decided to further invest in things to obtain more data. We have a couple people that we hired to basically data mine for tenant information so that we can increase our call volume. We invested in a company that helps us dial hundreds of people an hour so we can get through multiple cities in a short period of time. So we're hitting as many tenants as possible, finding out what their needs and desires are, and anything that might be on the horizon. So it enabled us to spread our wings. We've invested in some additional staff and interns. We've used some third-party companies. So we are probably investing more per head than most firms do. But we also feel that if we're giving not only Joe and I, but the rest of our team the right tools, that they will find success. And I think it's really important. It's obviously it's an expense, and we have to be mindful of that. But we feel if we don't do that, we're only going to hurt our chances of competing with the big boys. Because if we're doing things that they aren't, and we know what they invested because we've seen their systems for a long time, we can kind of exploit some of that so that we can find, again, our niche and try to be as successful as we can with all those tools. And it was a big decision and it was a financial obligation, but we decided, we're going to make this investment. And as the market starts to turn around, which we're finally seeing a little bit of glimpse with interest rates, and once home building comes back, hopefully the next 18 months, the level will get turned back on. But Joe set us up correctly so that when that happens, we're already there. We're not then having to do it because, we waited to then invest. We doubled down in the worst of times so that we're going to 2x or 3x out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you squirrel away the nuts in the winter time, as they say.
That's the 30-second soundbite. Is we double down on the marketing costs, right? We invested every technology we could possibly consider that might add value, from AI to calling to email to the rest of it, to try and identify tenants who had a need in the marketplace, as well as owners who maybe were looking to sell.
Absolutely. So, in this market environment, there's obviously a lot of things at play. You mentioned interest rates are finally coming down a little bit. Hopefully, we'll see where home building goes. What is yours and HLI's approach to the tenant rep process when they themselves are still not quite certain maybe what their requirements are or their business needs are evolving? Like, how do you think about partnering with them as they try to figure out what the heck they need and what's going on?
Sure. Well, I can give you a case study or a story. We wandered into a tenant's office a few weeks ago, and I'd spoken to him once or twice, and he said, "Let's go sit down in my office." And I was kind of surprised because he was so happy to see me. And we sat down, and it turns out that his landlord had passed away, and they had had a 20-year relationship, but he had a purchase option on his building that was sort of a handshake. And so the father of the landlord had taken over and had asked if he wanted to purchase, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to purchase or not. He had actually passed on it and was leaning on me to try and help him find a new location. And I said, why do you want to do that when maybe we can find a way to get you to stay here, such that you don't have to disrupt your business and you can pay a reasonable price closer to market, but not maybe at or above that someone might charge you if they bought it from the outside, because you're getting preferred rates. We create situations like that all the time with tenants that may have purchase options, or we have clients who need to consolidate under one roof, but they haven't been able to figure it out. And we did one in Apopka. We had one of the largest industrial deals the first half of the year. We moved legendary whitetails into a 280,000 foot building that Exeter had. And we were able to get a year of free rent. We had $5 million concession package negotiated. So it allowed Legendary to pull 4 buildings under one hat and create a really good outcome. So we'd love to find creative solutions that are a win-win for the landlord and the tenant and all involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to add to that point for these deals, kind of creating a deal out of nothing, which we did, there were 2 subleases that went with Legendary. And the good news is because our whole team makes so many calls, we're in front of so many tenants, we were able to sublease 50% of that obligation right out of the chute. And we kind of made like almost a guarantee to the tenant, like we're gonna make sure that we backfill this so you don't have an additional financial obligation when your lease comes out of those buildings into the new one. And pretty much gonna guarantee that promise.
Yeah, love to hear that.
Yeah, we took the risk with our client, so we stood behind our word.
Yeah, well, there's also an element of like, if you have all these different relationships and the personalities, what the business requirements are, you get to play matchmaker if you have all these different sides of the transaction that you are having these conversations with, right? So if something does work, then it's kismet. You're like, let's make it happen.
That's right.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I want to broaden a little bit. I've kept teasing it, but let's just start talking about Orlando right now. So, from both the industrial side and the office side, I know they're completely separate things, but how would you both characterize what you're seeing in Central Florida currently? Is it at an inflection point? Is it in recovery? Was there any oversupply, undersupply? What's going on now, and what's changed maybe in the last 5 years?
I'll let Joe go first on that one. He's been here longer.
Well, I would say there's every submarket has a different story to tell. It's real estate, obviously. But I think from the office side, we saw some large transactions go through last year. Wyndham, Mitsubishi, there was a couple that we did, and several others that sort of kick-started the market again on the office side. It was a little bit sleepy. And then the industrial side, this year, the first half was a little bit quiet. We had a big one that went through, and then all of a sudden you had the million-footer come off the board. You had now in Ocala, the 900 came off the board. So we've started to see the big blocks of space on the industrial side, which had not occurred in the last 3 years, start to happen the last 90 days. And I think home building, although it's somewhat flat right now, meaning there's no new starts for a lot of these companies, and we're seeing a lot of those vendors for distribution needs have their needs somewhat tabled at the moment. There are a lot of other specialty tenants out there in the marketplace. But I think to answer your question, we are at an inflection point. We feel like we're on the way back up. We're in a little bit of pause with home building, which affects our entire market. It's obviously, home building is one of the biggest industries in Central Florida. So when that is stalled out, everything from accountants, attorneys to closing title agents on down the line are on pause at the minute. But we've seen a lot of momentum that is picking back up on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, some other industries that are still okay, like Disney added some more shit. I think the largest cruise ship, and then I think it was Royal Caribbean. So there's in Port Canaveral, which is obviously on our coast, they've increased cruise business. So obviously there's some companies that have to support that. Like one of them, like Disney Cruise Lines, who's in our market, and a lot of the convention related companies are back because that convention business was down for a long time, as we all know, with COVID, but that's recovered. Obviously, Universal built Epic, which is our newest theme park, and Disney starting to do some expansion. So with that, there's some auxiliary companies that need to support those initiatives. We have Brightline now, so we've got a lot more high-speed train passengers from, say, South Florida coming up. They've expanded our international terminal at the airport. So there's some positive things that are happening that will yield some additional deals as we kind of, to Joe's point, as we wait for home building, since there's so many companies that are, affected by that, especially on the industrial side.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing medical, tourism, R&D, a lot of the specialty use tenants. I mean, we've got people who do tents for a living, as an example. We have 3 tent companies out in the marketplace that are
manufacturing?
Just supplying tents for the Ritz and
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. A vendor. Gotcha.
specialty related type tenants. Our tenant who's doing a build-to-suit with us, they're in the collectibles business, Pokemon and everything else that they sell to the retailers. So it's it's brought on a
That's
whole new
amazing.
subset of category of tenants out there.
And there's some bigger
That's
defense
fun.
contractors that are roaming around, especially over on the Space Coast. And so, yeah, like I said, it depends. Certain industries thrive, other ones are lagging. But I think the good news about Central Florida, to your question about Orlando, we're kind of like a hub market for the state. Obviously, Florida is a self-serving market because we're a peninsula. We're not kind of in the transportation lanes like the rest of the country, but we do have 23 million people, and more are coming for lifestyle and retirement reasons. And I think being up in Central Florida, we're north enough that we can get out of the state. We're kind of that equidistant between Miami and St. or Atlanta, and that's a big transportation lane. So I think we're located well as the market recovers to find some, additional opportunities.
Sure. So yeah, is there with the home building in particular, is it kind of just leftover high construction, high labor costs? Is it logistics costing too much? I know, like, just getting the materials in the first place, there were such long back orders for lumber and things like that. Are those kind of the drivers that are slowing down home development? Is it interest rates, cost of capital?
I think we had a big boom during COVID, which was sort of maybe inflated the market in terms of people moving here from all the different states that were shut down, combined with the fact that we had historically low interest rates. And then we also had the inflated boom of everybody who wanted an office in their house, who didn't have enough room, that was now clustered up. They wanted to go buy a new home. And those people can't move today because of interest rates. And so they're not buying that new house anymore. They're staying put for the time being. And so that's kind of constrained the growth in our, in that sector.
Sure. So I'm curious, on our prep call, we chatted a little bit about how you're noticing, larger bulk industrial inventory kind of slowing down from an interest standpoint and seeing more interest in smaller spaces coming online, and even some like large spots subdividing their spaces. What's going on there? What do you think is driving that adoption and that shift?
Well, I think, you may talk to certain brokers who are doing some of the bigger blocks of space that are coming off the board here in the last probably really 30 to 60 days since you and I had that initial conversation. But,
Sure.
You've seen Ocala lease a 900,000 foot block. You've seen Winter Haven. It looks like that million footers coming off the board. And you have several other tenants that are kicking around interested in some of the other bigger blocks. But I think Apopka in particular was a little bit overbuilt or oversubscribed for the big blocks of space up that way. We've got a 5, a 7, still remaining up there, and some other inventories. But overall, I think it's coming back. There's more interest now in the bigger spaces. We went through I think a quiet period there for almost a year and a half where it was pretty quiet.
Wow, it's just shifted in the last month. That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah, we've had Ferguson for 350, LKQ for 250, the 900 in Ocala, the million footer in Winter Haven, and a couple of these others in the last, 45 days, I guess?
Yeah, and we have a 400,000 square foot opportunity in East Orlando, and there's been a big uptick of interest. To Joe's point, for a while it was lagging, but it's a good sign that there's life coming back to the bigger box here in Central Florida.
Wow. Okay. Well, that changes things. So I'm curious, do you see there being good competition with the demand, or is it, we're just glad to have somebody interested in these larger spaces? We don't need to subdivide and start, appealing to smaller tenants, making concessions. How are you seeing that dynamic shift?
I think in certain cases, that remains to be seen, where there's buildings with no activity on them. The ones where you might have one or two tenants taking a look, I don't think it's yet at the pace that it was before, where we had multiple tenants and it was kind of a bidding war or trying to boot one out from the other. But historically, Orlando has absorbed one or two, 300 to 500,000 foot transactions a year. For a couple of years, we didn't have any. So it was, obviously a drought there for a period of time. But I think now that momentum is starting to return to somewhat normalcy, The smaller tenants have always been really active in Orlando for the, say, 20 to 60,000 foot traditional rear load type of multi-tenant facility. That's been healthy, the last few years. That hasn't waned.
And it's not going to detract from those who need that bigger space. So that's good to hear. It's right sizing a bit. So on the build to suit of it all, you also mentioned, and maybe this is old information too, that you've seen infill pricing spike.
Yes.
And in those situations, what is your analysis? Do you think that those deals are still penciling today where rents are? Do you think rents will start going up and making it make sense? What are you seeing there?
Well, I think that on the built-to-suit side, the premiums that we were kind of talking about, if you take Seminole County as an example, there's not a lot of land available. There's not a lot of land available anywhere in Orlando, but in particular, you got a lot of smaller owner user occupant up there. And we found that the premiums, depending upon the size, some tenants underneath 30,000 square feet, the range in pricing might be anywhere from 12 for functionally obsolete kind of depreciated product all the way up to maybe 16 for more Class A or newer product in certain size categories. But for build to suit along the Space Coast where you don't have very much land, if you're catching a tenant down there that has a need, there's really not a lot of choices for them to take, and the land is more expensive, so you're going to have to get a premium to come out of the ground.
Sure. Do you see that happening or not as much?
Yes. I mean, we did the Rockledge build to suit about a year and a half ago for ABC Building Supply down in Rockledge, and we were able to capture a premium in rent down there because there was such a lack of available land to build and do a traditional Class A tilt wall industrial building. It's just a function of your intercoastal versus the ocean. There's not much land in between, and if you've got to be there, then you're going to pay up for what's there.
Yeah.
And when I guess the benefit of doing these build to suits for Joe and I is you're staying in front of what construction prices are, on a daily basis, and how to back into these deals so that they make their yields. And that's definitely been a great learning curve for us, and a great education, because when you start looking at the top down of what these things cost and where there can be cost savings or where negotiations can happen on things like lumber or concrete, it definitely it helps when you're talking to tenants, especially about TI.
Sure, absolutely. Or even just to the landlords, right? You're like, I get how these things cost when you're building something new. So, kind of zooming a little bit more back, what macro factors, whether it's interest rates, we're starting to finally see the impact of tariffs. What are you seeing play most into local decision making in Orlando's market?
You hit the nail on the head. For the first half of the year, everyone was talking tariffs, and every phone call we made was, we can't make any decisions until we get through the tariff conversation. I think that people are still not ready to make decisions just yet to spend CapEx and spending across we kind of pull the audience with these cold calls. It's another great way to keep a pulse on the marketplace. If you're talking to, 20 or 30 people a day, and every week you're pulling, 50 or 60 business leaders. But I'd say for the most part, people are anticipating that next year we're going to start to see that CapEx return, the ability to consolidate facilities, spend the extra money and expand the plant or move. But a lot of them have to see, in certain industries, depending upon which ones you're talking about, see that market start to return. And I think interest rates play a huge factor in a lot of that.
Totally makes sense. And, kind of putting a bow on it all, where do you see the biggest opportunities in Orlando's market right now? And where do you see the biggest hidden risk in the market?
Go ahead, Jay.
Well, I think Joe and I have always had the attitude that if you're one of one, you're going to have a better chance of getting the deal done. And so we've kind of expanded to the secondary markets, like the coastal markets, getting pushed up towards like the Ocalas of the world, the Lake counties, where tenant comes in and he has one or two options. You're at least going to be able to compete for that business. And we like having a shot versus some of the more infill markets like Orlando that, where all the institutions play and a tenant comes in and he's got 10 options and you got to kind of have to run to the bottom. And I don't like playing that game. So I would rather, find some outlier competitive sites that we can at least throw our hat in the ring, so to speak.
Yeah, I think due to our size, we haven't wanted to compete with the larger institutional development shops. And so if we go on there to the edge, there's no comps for them to justify building anything. And if you can find some pent-up demand with tenants in the marketplace that would pay those premiums, then you've got sort of a magic recipe if you can get a pre-lease done. And I think,
sure,
to our credit, I think we've done 8 or 9 of these pre-leases in the last several years. And, I think we have 2 build-to-suit projects going on the last couple of years. And there certainly hasn't been many pre-leased buildings in the Central Florida market the last 3 years. So it's, it's just finding the tenants who have a need and trying to create a solution around that. And, that's the fun part. That's the challenge. And it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brokers are problem solvers. Make stuff happen. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Before I let you two go, I do want to get into a couple rapid fire questions, words of advice type, quick ones. If you guys are game. Yeah. So I think I know the answer to this question, but if I handed the two of you $50 million today and you had to invest it in real estate immediately, where would you invest it, in what, and why?
Who wants to go first?
You go, Jay.
$50 million, where would I place it, in what asset class, in our market? That we're talking about?
Any market.
Wow, it's hard. We know. You go first.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, if you're gonna put 50 million up, I better know exactly what I'm doing. So I'll say that I'd invested here in land and existing buildings where I know I could get a discounted price. Small warehouse, anywhere from 15 to 60,000 square foot spaces that are infill. We've had really good success with that. That would be my recipe: land and existing buildings in a smaller size range.
Great. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I think, to his point, I think building out like an industrial park, and I think spaces, like he said, in that 20 to 70,000 foot range, you can get in front of a lot of deals. And it's not just spending the money. I think designing it is half the battle. Me and him we look at site plans every day, and functionality is key. Making sure that you've got circulation and you've got employee parking that's probably better than average, so that you can grab a flex kind of tenant, because they do come along, especially with like aerospace and manufacturing related. Making sure you have things like trailer parking, having that infrastructure right, so you've got higher ceilings, better power. So when someone walks in, and maybe invest a little bit in the TI. Like, someone walks in and the office space is built out for the most part, and they can move in tomorrow, they're game. If they got to wait a year, then it starts becoming a different conversation. You lose that competitive edge. So that's probably a great investment that a lot of landlords don't do, is they don't spend the money when they can. And I understand there's a risk to that, but tenants, when they want to move in, they want to move in. They don't want to wait. Get
the right engineering team, get the best architect, don't skimp. Absolutely.
Nope, that's the best advice right there.
They are better for you in the long run. Conversely, what is the worst advice you've been given about being successful in commercial real estate?
Well, you can go first, Joe, on that one.
No, you go.
I think the worst advice is if someone tells you, especially if they're new, that this job is easy. A lot of I'd say this for newer people in the industry. This is a career. This is not a job. And it takes a long time to learn the business, learn a market, learn about how deals are made and why and where, and understanding the players. I think great advice is, and this was learned to me early in my career. You got to learn how to kill a deal as much as you know how to make a deal. And once you really understand that concept, it probably makes your job a lot easier. But as Joe will tell you, there's nothing easy about brokerage. It's a grind. It's competitive. It's repetitive. It's a 24/7 kind of opportunity, but it can also take you to places that a normal job just can't, if you're willing to just hang in there, grind it out, do the work, build a great team and have a great mentor. That if you have a great mentor, you're going to have a platform to succeed. If you don't, it's going to be a lot harder road. Not that you can't get there. You just have to work twice as hard.
Can you elaborate on that phrase really quick? You need to know how to kill a deal as much as make a deal work. I'm curious what that means.
Well, when you have your client, they're going to make decisions, right? And sometimes they may not see the whole field. It could be sometimes they're sensitive to where management lives. If you choose the wrong location and now your manager has to drive another 45 minutes, they may not be in tune to that. Or where things are coming from the port, from drayage costs, transportation costs, insurance reasons if you're close to some coastal markets. So sometimes if a decision maker, for example, is in Seattle, Washington, and you're talking about a local deal here in Central Florida, he may not understand all the little underlyings that might be a bad real estate decision outside of price per square foot.
Totally. Appreciate that.
You need to be able to tell your tenant which landlords are going to be a problem for them downstream, which tenants have issues, whether it be property management or neglecting the property, on down the line. But
yeah. Sometimes a savvy real estate decision maker may not understand how local landlords might work. And there's little clauses within a lease. Maybe it's holdover that somebody else does better. Maybe it's right to move these tenants that might be a bad move for, say, a manufacturer. There's all these little things that somebody may not think about. That's not, one of the big bullet points, but the small ones is where it can make and break your company, let alone just a real estate deal.
Sure. And you got to look out for your client. It's that fiduciary duty. Awesome. I appreciate that. And then finally, what is the craziest way you have found a new client? It can be through social media. I had someone find a client who was actually fixing a chandelier in a hotel lobby. Any fun stories?
You can go first.
Go ahead, Jay.
I gotta think for a hot minute. We've been in some weird places over the years.
I think one of my most fun prospecting stories was I had spoken to a company, a receptionist, and we'd become friends over a period of about 10 or 12 years. And so she knew me by first name. I called in one day and she goes, "Oh, Brian and the staff is up at the conference in DC." And I said, "Oh, is that the this and that? I just made something up." And she said, "No, it's over at this and, that or the other thing. And they've got their kickoff tonight for the NFL party or something." And I said, "Oh, that's great. That's at the Hilton, right?" She said, "No, it's at the Marriott at this and that." And so I just looked at our marketing coordinator and I said, "Give me a flight to DC, in the next hour and a half or whatever, 2 hours." And so packed a bag quick from the house, went on a plane. I was there in front of their whole staff. They had a open to the public, NFL watch party at this big convention for all their customers. And of course, they all knew who I was because I'd been calling on them for 12 years. And so, showed up.
Slipped on into the party.
Right into the party. Tried to do the best I could without being too much of an annoyance, but to let them know that I cared enough to show up. And they were later a client of mine within a few months after that. But
that's so funny. And it was at the Hilton. No, people love to correct you. So that's a good tip. That's a very good tip.
This was early in my career. I was visiting a friend in San Francisco, and I'm from Philadelphia, so I had an Eagles sweatshirt on, and I saw another guy had an Eagles shirt on. So in Philadelphia you say "Go Birds," right? Mm-hmm. And so I started just BS with the guy just because we were both at the airport. Turned out he owned a broom manufacturing company in my market, and it started the relationship. And ended up selling his building like 2 years later, just because literally just randomly just
go birds.
So, yeah. So you never know, right?
Those are both great stories. I love that. I'm glad I asked. Well, awesome, Joe. Josh, it's been so much fun. As we wrap up, any final insights, parting words you want to share with Crexi's audience?
I would say if there's brokers at that point in their career where they don't feel like they fit in the big shop anymore and they're wondering if they have the wherewithal to do this, I would say you do. You just need to know and believe in yourself enough to know that you're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life, but you also have the advantage of reaping more rewards than you've ever gotten by working for somebody else, because you've always been told that you couldn't do it or you wouldn't be able to do it or whatever the case might be. But if you believe strongly enough, you'll make it through the gauntlet. It's well worth it on the other side.
Yeah, I would second that, and I would tell people that they can do it. They need to believe in themselves. And let's face it, we all work in commercial real estate every single day, 24/7, 365. So why not put yourself in a position to eventually own commercial real estate? Because, for Joe and I, we think that that's the end goal. It's the game. That's what's going to get us, hopefully, our wealth and hopefully lead us towards retirement. So I would say, yeah.
The other part I think I would leave with, Shanti, is I always found it amusing. All the brokers that I was surrounded by invested in stocks. They like to talk about which stocks they were trading all day. And I got in the business, and I had watched my dad go through a couple of different, employee-owned stock crash, investments. And so I really was headlong into real estate. And it's proven to be, the best to focus on what we had competitive advantage on, meaning we had knowledge in the business. We were able to position ourselves and buy buildings and land where we knew that we could get a good opportunity pulled together. And so I would tell people that don't discount the fact of buying is a good opportunity in commercial real estate.
Yeah, it's the best investment for you to get your hands dirty with.
That's right.
Be able to have a hand in shaping your outcome. Real estate's where it's at. Both of y'all, thank you so much for joining us. Really down, sharing your insights. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch? Email, social media, where online?
They can probably go to our website at HLIPartners.com. It's a good starting point. All our contact information is on there, and we're available to answer any questions for anyone like us that's out there that's thinking about maybe going out on their own or have any questions about the Central Florida commercial real estate market.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Oh, go ahead.
We appreciate it very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Crexi for video recordings of each episode. For a full list of episodes and show notes, visit Crexi.com/podcast. That's CREXI.com/podcast. And sign up to get the very next episode delivered straight to your inbox. Take care, and we'll see you next time.